to Pedal Sniffers episode 4?
5.
Thank you for that late coming correction. This is our power supply episode, and it's late, and I don't remember the number because it's been such a pain in the ass.
Quite. We've been dreading this episode, and part of the reason why we're a little bit late, a week late to our next episode.
It's the entirety of the reason why.
Yeah.
If you take a look at the spreadsheet, which you'll find linked in the episode resources on our website, pedalsniffers.com, you'll get a sense of why we've both been, just inundated with data paralyzation.
Yeah, it's been tedious and arduous. I finished the spreadsheet Friday, and yeah, so here we are.
All right. Well, we'll explain in detail why it's in detail when we get there. But I would say that another reason why we're late is we plan to have a NAMM episode. NAMM is the National Association of Music Merchants. This is the music retail industry's trade show. There are 2 every year. One is Winter NAMM in Anaheim, California, which is the big, giant, amazing show that if you've ever heard of NAMM, you've heard of this show. And then in late June, is the Summer NAMM in Nashville, which is like the low-key NAMM. You could, if you were interested in seeing everything on display at Winter NAMM and you didn't want to spend 30 seconds at each booth, in order to do so, it would probably take you 3 days to see everything. In contrast, at Summer NAMM, you can if you get there early enough, you can be out by lunch. I know that me saying that probably makes you feel like you'd love to be there, and you're probably right.
I would, Tony.
And I'm saying that as a grizzled veteran of NAMM shows. And some of the appeal is lost on me. But truth be told, and you're speaking to that truth with the enthusiasm of a youngster, it's freaking amazing. It's so much stuff, and you'd love to see every single thing.
Tony, if you don't want to go, I'll go instead. I'm fine.
I mean, that may happen next summer. that will happen. All right, so I gave you the sense of scale of the NAMM shows because I simply wanted to explain that what I had planned to have been a NAMM show that I had discussed all the amazing things I saw with David and we would fill a whole episode with was I came back with really nothing.
Yeah, it was a little underwhelming, even from a third-person point of view watching on. There wasn't much as far as new releases, cool things. It was just kind of meh.
Yeah, I mean, most manufacturers save their good stuff for Winter NAMM. This is a mid-year thing. We get it. It's cool that it's a low-key NAMM because then there's other things that go on, and perhaps you do a little more socializing than you would otherwise. And Nashville is a pretty damn cool place to do that.
For sure. And I do know, as far as things that were released, Kemper did release reverbs, which I understand is a pretty big deal, or are going to release some new reverbs.
Okay, cool. Then you would understand exactly why I had absolutely zero interest in that. It isn't a pedal. I can't sell it.
It's true.
It's like, what do I care? So, yeah.
That was the only thing I was interested in, and I don't even have a Kemper.
So we had zero to talk about, with the exception of my appearance. Thank you very much at the Retail Innovators session during breakfast at NAMM. So in front of the big audience of people who decided to get up early enough to have breakfast at NAMM, they interviewed me about Pedal Genie as an innovative retailer. And it was a bit nervous, I suppose, but everybody says it was good, and I got to talk about Pedal Genie.
Did they video it?
I have not been able to find a recording of such. It was live streamed at the time.
On Facebook?
I looked for video. I think so. And I looked for video immediately following the event, but I hadn't been able to find anything.
Bummer.
Yeah. I'm kind of both bummed about that, but also happy.
I want to see it.
Well, our work companions were there to witness, so you can inquire to them at some point.
Did Tony suck?
Exactly. Yeah, that was on the top of my mind. So that was the highlight of NAMM.
Cool.
So you ready to talk about power supplies?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel.
It's been a month of pre-production in this episode, around there.
So what is like the biggest purchasing or like education issue surrounding power supplies? One word? What is that one word?
What's the one word? Is it isolation, Tony?
That is the word, right? What the hell does that mean?
I want it to be isolated, but I don't know what that means.
All right. So when you've got your plug-in wall wart power supply, and lots of people call these one spots. It's one of those brand things like Xerox and Kleenexes that you don't want to happen. People take their one spot and they plug it into one pedal. That's your basic power supply. When you take a one spot and you daisy chain it to another pedal, you've created a power chain with power that is between the two pedals, not isolated. This can be good. This can be not bad is probably a better way to say that.
It's a great way to test pedals individually, I think.
And you could, depending on the rig, say 2 analog drive pedals and a tuner, or analog delay, a drive pedal, and a tuner on a little board would function perfectly with a reasonable daisy chain. No reason to, I think, see anything in there. Throw a fuzz, throw a digital pedal, throw something else, you might have some issues, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So you've got your daisy chain, but now what are those issues we're talking about? Issues involving isolation and pedals generally revolve around noise. We all hate noise, right?
Noise is the worst thing ever.
How about noise is the antithesis of music?
Yes, it is. Which is funny because really we are making noise, but we hate noise.
It's unorganized sonic frequencies versus, intended.
It's like
sonic
someone
frequencies.
screaming versus someone singing really good.
All right. Yeah. You got it. Disorganized versus intended.
Yes.
Man, how did we get off on that on power supplies? I'm really on a tangent here.
Who knows, Tony? Who knows?
All right. We were trying to explain isolation and why it's important. So you isolate your pedals' power from each other in order to reduce the noise potential in your signal chain. That's why.
Yeah.
Now, some of the cloudiness surrounding isolation is, how do I know if a pedal is isolated? Assuming we want it to be something that we want, it's important. How do we know to look for it? How do we know something's isolated? I mean, it might say so on the package, but we want to be sure that it meets our sanity test, so to speak. Yeah, exactly.
Is it actually isolated even though it says it is?
Correct. I don't really have a good answer for that. Due to the difference or the two primary methods of powering power supply of isolation, using switching power supplies and transformered power supplies, we do know that continuity testing the grounds between the power outlets on a power supply will definitely tell you that it is isolated, but the absence of that test isn't necessarily true. Mm-hmm. So I really don't have a full-on answer for you. So
yeah, you have to kind of trust the. Obviously, if you know what you're talking about and know what you're looking at, you would know if it's isolated or not. But most of us are just going to have to trust what the manufacturers say.
Yes. So what you're hearing from us is our advice based on, product experts and not electrical engineers.
Yes.
So we're going to trust the manufacturers in most cases. And when you see some of the differences between the power supplies we're talking about and how they provide power, we can solidly say that the ones we believe isolated are logically kind of like isolated.
Absolutely.
So that's a key factor. Like we said earlier, it's not the be-all, end-all. Just because a power supply isn't completely isolated isn't necessarily a bad thing, depending on the pedals you're powering and your rig as a whole. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, allow us to present the Pedal Sniffers Power Supply Survey. Yeah! All right, awesome. So we've arranged this by branded model, obvious. Price, also obvious. Dimensions, in inches, width, depth, height. Dimensions are not super important, but can definitely be a limiting factor depending on the board you're trying to power.
Yeah, in most cases, if you have like a medium-sized board, any single one of these power supplies will fit under it.
Yep. Well, I guess only if we're talking about something small, you have to take into consideration the power supply size that you are interested in. When you power them, we wanted to know if the pedal was took switchable voltage, also known as like worldwide voltage, using 110 in the U.S. and 220 and other things in between around the world.
Yep.
That's a yes or no question. Interestingly enough, the only ones that aren't are the ones that are made exclusively in the USA.
Which is only 2.
Then that's not to say that they don't make ones for the other markets. It's just that they have individual models for those power supplies.
Voodoo Labs and Walrus in particular. And I know Voodoo Labs makes other versions of it available for different countries, but I'm not sure about Walrus.
Correct. That's my assumption also. Then we wanted to know if it had a courtesy outlet. This is an extra plug for another AC plug to plug into your power supply, usually to, say, daisy chain another small pedal board or power some brick for some pedal that had some crazy-ass power requirements.
I have used my courtesy out to power my Strymon Ojai from my Voodoo Labs Mondo, because even the Mondo does not have enough power for my ginormous pedal board.
Exactly. Courtesy outlets are cool. Again, not a necessity, but might be a really, really good convenience for you depending on your rig as a whole.
For sure.
There aren't many that have it, but the ones, like I said, it's a factor, and a few of them are our top picks. So, then the biggest part of the spreadsheet is made up of the trying to identify the power configuration options for the power supply. They all provide 9 volts, but then they all provide other voltages like 12 or 15 or sag voltages for less than 9 volts to simulate batteries, all the way up to 24 volts in some of these things. So, each column in the spreadsheet is a unique configuration. For example, 9 volt only versus 9 to 12 volt switchable versus 9, 12, 15, 18 volt switchable.
Yep.
All of those are unique configurations. And in some cases, we have multiple instances of that same configuration because it differs by the milliamps provided to that section.
Yep.
One power supply might have 6 outputs at 100 milliamps, but 2 of them at 200 milliamps. So all of these individual columns in the spreadsheet, so we can do some like cool pedal sniffers math.
Yep.
All right.
Have you ever had a dream that
what is and
you want him to do you so much you could do anything?
We derive at this score.
So the score is essentially, it equates to how much power per dollar that has, like its power capability in general. So that's like the output per dollar, 9 volt output per dollar, and the milliamp per dollar put together. So essentially, it's how much power per dollar that pedal has. Now, my gripe against it was that I kind of think that's a little bit skewed because I think maybe the amount of outputs might be more important than the milliamps. Because,
well, all right then. Then allow me to explain precisely the score.
I like the score, and after we talked, I agree with you. I think it's a cool thing.
So here it is. Here's how they are weighted. They are equally. The total amount of amperage of the power supply is equally weighted to the number of outputs of the power supply. because we wanted to numerically rank the power supplies that favored ones with high current and favored ones with with more outlets. And then we wanted to favor them by lowest price, right? The ideal power supply has unlimited amperage, unlimited outputs, and cost nothing. So what's the best thing in between those options?
For sure.
Let me pause to a minute, though, and explain why we, or actually you, why do we feel high current is important? Why is that a choice decision factor?
First of all, what would we consider high current? I think it'd probably be 300 and above.
Yes, that would be my guess also. 300 and above.
So for a majority of modern digital pedals, it's a necessity. And on many boards, there's more than one. So these high current outputs are a necessity for anything like a timeline, any of the Strymon stuff, any of the Eventide stuff, a couple of the Quaker pedals that take 400 milliamps. And in the world we live in, a high current output is very important for many of the pedals you will see on most people's boards. So it's become kind of a benchmark to kind of gauge what the importance or the usefulness of a power supply might be. And in the case of some of these power supplies, they might have a lot of outputs, but some of them might not even go up to 200 per se.
Correct. We've got a few power supplies on the list whose volume of outputs, doesn't live up to the milliamps output produced.
So, it's skewed. Sure. It's a curious thing.
All right. So in general, the more high output current, the more high current outputs, the better. The more outputs, the better, and the cheaper, the better.
For
right?
sure.
Okay, so to that end, the score is comprised of the following mathematical equations. Statisticians and whatever can email me comments, but this is what I got.
Big words.
Yes. So we've taken the total. First, I need to explain that we are only in our calculation taking the 9 volt capable outputs. So if an output has a 9 volt output, but is also switchable to 9 to 12, it counts. If it's switchable 9, 12, 15 to 18, it counts. But if it's switchable only to 18 or 12 or 18 or only 15 or only something that's not 9, I'm not counting it in the formula. So this is because, David, how many pedals use 9 volts?
All of them for most part.
Most of them.
For example, I don't think there's many. If we're talking about like a modern or like a current pedal, I can't think of many that run on anything but 9 volts. I have a board comprised of 16 pedals, I believe. Every single one of them, 9 volts. I don't use a single 12 volt, 18 volt, or 24 volt spot.
All right, so then it's somewhere between most of them and all of them.
Yes.
So that's exactly why we chose to only count the 9 volt outputs. Now, when you happen to have one of those oddball 1% or less pedals that don't take 9 volts
or can take more,
right? Or can, you'll want to pay attention to the other capabilities of that power supply. But disregarding that, we're really concerned with the total number of 9 volt outputs, plus we wanted to have the total number of current offered by this power supply. So the math is as follows. The total number of 9 volt outputs divided by the price, or is it the other way around? That gives us basically outputs per dollar. And then we have the total number of milliamps per dollar. Mm-hmm. Those two values multiplied give us a score. And in this case, the way that the math works, the lower the score, the better.
Yes, so it's like golf, which is boring, just like this score is a little bit.
All right, so I think the best way to help explain the score is with an example. So we will take the highest scoring and thus worst performing by score power supply on the list as an example, and we also get to explain isolation at the same time. So the T-Rex Classic not tone trunk. What's it called?
It's the Goliath. Or sorry,
No,
the classic.
The classic. The T-Rex Classic is a 179 reasonably priced power supply with what it bills as 9 outputs, 8 of them as 800, 8 of them that share 500 milliamps. And therein lies the difference on this power supply. Since these 8 outputs are not isolated, we treated them as one output in the formula.
Yeah.
And you'll see that in the spreadsheet indicated by a number in parentheses following the value that we used.
Yeah, it was something I was a little confused about until talking to Tony when making the spreadsheet, because it looked almost as though it had 8 500 milliamp 9-volt outputs, which would be an outstanding value for money. But in really in all reality, it's 8 outputs that share 500 milliamps.
That would also be, I guess, an obvious flag to point out to people that, hey, if your power supply says these outputs share any amount of current, well, by virtue of them sharing, they are not isolated.
The actual term I did see is they share the same ground.
That's correct.
That's what you want to look for.
Now, you may have a power supply that has groups of outputs that share current.
Yeah.
And those groups would be isolated from each other, you would assume.
Mm-hmm. And some chalks have, like, some of the chalks power supplies have a few instances to where they have not the entire, not like 8 outputs to the same ground, but like 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, and again, indicated in the spreadsheet by the groups that we're talking about. So that has an abnormally high score for this spreadsheet because of that. It takes a 9 output power supply and it treats it as a 2. Now, by the same token, you would think that, okay, how about the one with the most outputs, which is the Phoenix from Walrus? And while it does have 15 outputs, its total milliamp output gives it a score a little higher than some of our best options. So you get a feeling of how the thing weights, and maybe that helps you explain the score better.
Mm-hmm. And even that being said, it only has 4 high milliamp outputs. Which
Correct. But I nearly forgot the other perfect explanation for the score, and that's the True Tone 1 spot itself, which has the lowest score possible because its single output has a very high current at a very low cost.
Yes.
So it has an abnormally low score.
That being said, it is a wall wart, and without daisy chain, it can only power 1 pedal.
For sure. All right. So hopefully, now that you understand the score, our descriptions of the pedals on this list now might become clear to you.
For sure.
So starting at the top, the BBE Supercharger at $95 is a solid pick.
I agree. I think it's isolated. It doesn't have any high milliamp outputs, but for a starter pedal, a starter power supply, I think the individuals it's targeted at won't necessarily even be able to afford or have the pedals that would require such a high milliamp rating anyway.
If you don't need any high current outputs, it's the best thing at the price point, probably at $100.
It's a solid option.
All right. Then we've got a large variety of chalks power supplies.
So, as far as variation in voltage outputs available and like different kinds, if you have weird pedals that take weird power, chalks are probably the ones to look at because you have
They have the most switchable options, it looks like.
Yeah, and you have many of them have variations of different voltages of AC. I think they're the same as the others. So you have like a 9, 12, and 18 volt AC option on a couple of them.
Oh, let's mention that real quick because we haven't talked about that at all. Some power supplies do have AC outputs, which are even rarer than non-9 volt DC pedals.
But the pedals that require AC that you put on your board are almost as rare as well.
Yeah. So if you have one of those, you need that. Pay attention to that column because there are only a handful of power supplies that offer AC outputs. Now, in the Chalks line, our biggest gripe with the entire brand is
RCA jacks.
Yes. The cable that connects between the power supply and the pedals is not the pedal connector on both ends. Instead, it's the pedal 2.1 millimeter barrel connector that you're used to seeing with an RCA plug on the other side.
No. You may actually, when I was thinking about this, it almost doesn't seem like a super big deal. But when you have other power supplies that are not the same thing, you can't just simply move over a power cable.
I'm sorry. I was going to say that's exactly the thing that I was saying. You just can't intermingle. But if it's your only power supply, it's probably not a big deal.
Yeah.
But what was your other concern?
And then replacing them. But again,
harder to find, less common.
Yeah, right? it's in general, and also kind of not super expensive, but only one of these is rated highly in our score, and I think they're mid to high tier prices for what you're getting. They are made in Germany. And to be honest with you, a lot of the information on some of them is a little bit cryptic as far as finding out where to buy them, what they really can do. There's a few that we did not even list because I couldn't find anything, at least in America, where you could get them.
Gotcha. They do have a really good form factor
for sure.
In most cases. Pretty low height, nice proportions. But yeah, man, that RCA thing kills me. I kind of can't get past it, even though one of them's my top pick. It's like my one reservation against it entirely. Then we've got Decibel 11. They've got some solid entries. They're, I guess in a way, they're at the end of our list, but anybody who knows power supplies knows Voodoo Labs. And the Decibel 11s are, relative, I don't want to say clones, but, they're made in the mold of the Voodoo Labs power supplies.
They're very similar. Actually, I've not looked at the prices comparatively, but I think they're not far off.
Yeah, they're a solid entry. Friedman, we have their single power supply, the Power Grid 10 on the list. It is a solid choice. MXR, we spent a lot of time talking about MXR, about these two power supplies in our pre-production. The MC403 you may not have seen. It's kind of an odd bird, but you've likely seen the MXR isobrick everywhere.
Yes.
And not to be confused with the MXR DC brick,
which is not isolated,
while the MXR ISO brick is. So even though it uses a wall wart, and this litmus test that we've come to be mostly true, even though it uses a wall wart, internally the outputs inside the ISO brick are isolated from each other.
Yeah, we probably took, between the two of us, probably an hour of making sure that was true. Just because of one of our coworkers has had issues with one, and then just the manual being kind of cryptic and whether or not it's isolated.
Even with that handicap, it is a good value and scores super well on our scale.
My main gripe on this power supply is I think it's either 2 or 4 of the outputs have a linear pot to change the voltage. Which
yes, two of your outputs have a 9 to 15 volt adjustment, and you're saying that the knob is not useful because it has the wrong taper?
It scares me because I'm worried of your board. If you're anything like me, you move your board a lot, and sometimes there are things under it, etc.
Okay. And then physical movement of the knob.
Yeah, and that you could accidentally move the knob and then ruin a pedal potentially, which would be awful. So it really should be a dip switch or
like a set screw where you need a screwdriver right below the surface to
absolutely
adjust
it's just too easily moved, in my opinion.
Right.
So
understood.
That's something to watch out for with that one.
Cool. Pedal Train's lone entry, the Power Train 1250. Again, in the mold of Voodoo Labs, solid choice, but did not score well, mostly due to its low current.
Yeah.
The low current.
Oh, and like the, the T-Rex Classic, it has 4 9-volt outputs chained together with a total of 500 milliamps between them all to share.
Exactly. That exactly explains why their score is not so great.
And really, to make it simple, all that is a glorified daisy chain.
And not a very high current one at that.
No, not at all.
All right, so a relative newcomer to the world of power supplies, Strymon introduced the Ojai and the Zuma last winter, NAMM, and they've been solid choices ever since. They're a little pricey, but they are excellent values because of the total and high current per output they offer.
They are extremely powerful. I've seen a couple of videos, too, as far as noise goes in comparison to my probably arguably my favorite brand, Voodoo Labs, and they're just in general with some pedals they are absolutely quieter than some.
I would give my trust issues the benefit of the doubt with a company like Strymon because they're building these power supplies specifically to power their own pedals. So given the engineering that goes into their own pedals, you can be pretty certain they're going to take this shit pretty seriously.
Yeah. I've had a timeline on my board for almost 4 or 5 years, and it's not gone wrong at all. And anything that has gone wrong as far as it's been like the hardware, because I messed it up just through wear and tear. But the internals of it are absolutely rock solid. And I doubt the Strymon power supplies will be anything different. I've had my Ojai for 6 months now, and it's been rock solid.
Awesome. T-Rex, let's call it a disappointing showing as a whole.
Yeah, I always kind of like them.
They're solid quality German units, but German, right?
It's either
Dutch,
German or
Danish, Denmark. Oh my God, I don't know. I should shut my mouth.
It's not American. It's not American, Tony.
I feel like they're well engineered. The problem is that they lack high current, they lack isolation in most cases, and the one that does have 450 outputs happens to be $300. So they don't. In fact, none of them are amongst our picks. To contrast with True Tone, the maker of the one spot.
As a whole, probably the highest scoring, or well, I should say the lowest scoring, but as a whole, scoring? The best. Yes. As a whole, the best scoring brand in general,
for sure. I wasn't necessarily aware of them in this way, but my research has shown that they're super solid choice, and the scoring backs that up.
I agree. I will say, in comparison to Voodoo Labs and a lot of the reviews I've read, they're a little bit less reliable, and that's just a tiny bit. That just has to do with Voodoo Labs having many more.
And that's just anecdotally, right?
Yeah, it's anecdotal. They don't have the history. Voodoo Labs is just overall a little bit better rated. But even that being said, the True Tone stuff seems to be absolutely rock solid and a great option, especially for the price. The CS12 is $180. And it's like it powers pretty much as the Voodoo Labs Mondo will, and that is $249.
Yeah, it scores very high. That's not even the best one of the bunch. The CS7 has an even better score. Fewer outputs in total, but more current.
For sure.
And a super nice form factor. No, I'm sorry. That's the CS6. It's nearly as well scoring brother that has the low profile form
They're
factor.
roughly around the same size as the Voodoo Lab stuff.
Yeah. Well, but except for the CS6, which is half the size. Half the size of that profile.
Really quick, we need to go back because the Strymon stuff is really low profile.
All right, we'll get to that when we talk about the Ojai.
Cool.
Because it being one of our top picks, the size is one of those reasons.
True.
That leaves us to Voodoo Labs. You said the granddaddy thereof, and I think they've almost invented the power supply space for pedals.
They're probably, I would equate them to the boss of power supplies.
Yeah, I would. That's an excellent comparison. The Power 2 Plus has been their most popular model, but you can see that it actually doesn't score really well here, only because it doesn't provide as much current as nearly all our other picks.
Yeah, and I think we both ran into issues when building boards with people who had this power supply because it just doesn't quite have enough power.
They were great for the power. Those power supplies were great for the board they had, but now they have 2 Strymons on there. They have other things that are hungry that this just can't do without sacrificing too many outputs.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you got to throw these things in there when they happen. I don't want to say with absolute certainty, but with 99% certainty, any of these power supplies will function with a current doubler or a voltage doubler cable. So
I have used one in the past.
You can keep in mind that if a power supply is perfect for you, except for this one reason where, like, say you need 18 volts and it doesn't have it, or you need way amounts of current for just this one thing, using a current doubler or a voltage doubler adapter could get you there and solve your problem. So keep that in mind.
For sure.
All right, so last is the Walrus Audio Atos and Phoenix. These have been perennial favorites around our place for a while. They score pretty well. We put them in the second tier,
medium
scoring.
Medium tier.
The Phoenix is their virtue alone of the fact that it has 15 outputs. It's the most of any power supply here.
But only 4 high outputs.
Correct. But still, 15 outputs. I mean,
that is true. I don't think let me look at my board real quick. Never mind, it's in the case. I can't even think. But I don't think I have more than 4 high milliamp required pedals. And none of them, I believe, are actually over 300 milliamps.
So the Phoenix does have a downside, and that is its length. It's also relatively tall. I mean, at 10 inches long, it's, I think, the longest power supply on the list. No, it's beaten by the Chocolat,
the Mondo
which is
longer.
Super long.
The Mondo's longer.
The Mondo is longer. Oh, wow, it is.
10.7 inches.
It's the proportions of the Phoenix because it's more square.
Is it taller, though?
It isn't, actually. I was just thinking that, but it's 2.6 times 2 as opposed to 3.4 times 1.8. So it's more square. So it makes it look taller than it really is.
Well, it is taller than Mondo. For sure.
Its size is one of its downsides.
Yes.
And then the Atos is great at 8 outputs, but also is limited by current, having only 2 300 milliamp outputs.
Yep.
So that is the list in general. There are obviously a lot of things that we've left out. Almost always we like to exclude import clones and things that are a generally questionable nature.
Yeah, glorified daisy chains, which we do have a few of, but like there's quite a few things we have left out. There's many power supplies actually, particularly in Chalks, and then actually a couple other brands that I saw that do not have things you can buy or released yet that we have not included.
So if you're a U.S. consumer specifically, this is pretty representative of
what you can get,
what the market is. And like David said, with actually less of the Chalks available than you'll probably be able to find. With that, David, what are your favorite pedals on this list?
Power supplies.
Power supplies. I forgot. We're not power supply sniffers. We're pedal sniffers.
I guess I'll go with brand more so than... Because I think the brand overall, each brand is going to pretty much be the same throughout the power supplies as far as reliability, the capabilities and features, apart from it's just an expansion as you move up to the bigger power supplies. But if we're talking about individual power supplies, I'm just going to go with what I have because they are my favorites. The Voodoo Labs Mondo, I love. It's a very high scoring power supply. Scoring. It's a close one. I actually, even that being said, I think when we sorted it differently, it was around 7th place. Heads up, the score, the first tier of score is anything less than
2.0 is tier 1, and anything less than 3.0 is tier 2. And you'll see that on the color coded by the spreadsheet. So,
but yeah, price wise, it's right along the lines of where it needs to be. Voodoo Labs is kind of the benchmark to where prices are normally at for power supplies. Has a ton of outputs. One of my main things I look for in pedal power supplies is that every single output is able to run 9 volts, because I have no use for something that has, let's say, 10 outputs that do 9 and then another 2 that only do 12. If they're going to do something differently, I would prefer them to be switchable, as it makes that power supply more useful in the long run if I were to change things out or want to run something differently, which the Mondo does do. So that has met all my criteria. It's large, which is technically a downside if you have a smaller board, but I don't know why anyone would use a Mondo to power a smaller board. It's kind of for the larger boards like what I have. So as far as how reliable it's been very reliable. I have no issues. It's extremely quiet, isolated. It runs fairly cool. I guess that would matter. It has a fan in it. But it's been rock solid ever since I bought it, probably 4 or 5 years ago. And then my other pick would be all the Strymon stuff. And then that's just because of the milliamps. It's interesting that we would talk about Strymon as for value for money, because actually from how much power they can provide, it's a really solid choice.
Yeah, they do exist on the mid to upper tier of the pricing. But they represent a great value.
And then on top of that, just the form factor. I think you can fit them in any board you're going to find. Even with some of them that do require the brick, they're short enough as far as how tall they are to be able to fit under any board. I love my Ojai, the 500 milliamp outputs. I think I actually power every single one of my high output pedals from my Ojai, just because I know it's going to do it.
The Strymon stuff is really cool because of how modular it is, sharing the 24 volt connection between linkable power supplies.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So my one thing is though, they end up being more expensive in the long run when you need more outputs. If you don't want daisy chain, because you could daisy chain a bunch of analog drop pedals together. I prefer not. 500
milliamps is enough to power 2, 3, maybe 4 pedals.
Yeah,
for sure.
I prefer to stray away from that. I like each pedal have its own output, just for absolute guarantee that I'm going to be isolated and quiet. That being said, the Zuma at 250 does not have, in comparison to all the other pedals, power supplies in that range, it has 3 or 4 less outputs.
Yeah, it doesn't have enough outputs to power the biggest boards.
Yeah. So
when you add say an Ojai on top of it, now you've spent $400.
Yeah. I do know the expansion kits are less. That's my one gripe, is that when you need more, it gets a little expensive. I will also say, if my Mondo ever went down, I'm buying Zuma. So
I think that says a lot. All right, here's what I think is super interesting about 24 volts. And it's going to veer slightly off topic. We are big proponents, you and I, of patch bays on your pedal board. Moving all your jacks to a singular location so that setup and tear down is easy, and your cables that run to your amp or to offstage can be bundled together. The logical conclusion of that streamlining is to also include power in your cable bundle or in your snake. I would love to do that, but I am always hesitant to bundle AC power lines like the extension cord to my pedal board with my audio lines. I think that's just asking for trouble.
For sure.
But what you can do with the Strymon supplies at 24 volts is run the 24 volt cable in your power snake. Putting the power supply brick or modular at the back of your rig, running 24 volts in your pedal board snake, and then having all of the DC happen, the outputs happen at the pedal board. So if your ultimate goal is, a single-ish kind of plug or the easiest plug harness possible to connect your pedal board in one fell swoop, that's one way to get it.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. That's a super cool idea.
Thank you very much. I get one of those every once in a while. So the Strymon stuff is great for being modular and for offering all the high current and the ability to.
I also, in the module realm, I do want to mention Chalks because their Link series are all technically modular as far as being able to connect together pretty easily.
Yes. With the exception that you're chaining them via AC plugs.
Rather than
not some other DC, yeah.
Yes.
That also reminds me of there's a new Voodoo Lab product that we did not put on the list, and that is, I think it's called the X4, and it is similar in construction to the Strymon Ojai with a much larger power brick and a small, low-profile 4 or 5 output box.
I didn't even know about that.
So I think it's $99, which would make it a great value. And now that we're talking about it, its lack of appearance on the spreadsheet is important. So now that we've talked about it, I will try to get it on the spreadsheet before we release this episode.
I did not even know that existed, Tony.
Yeah, that's cool. I think it's a direct answer to Strymon's evolution of the power supply in the market.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty big leap in tech. I guess I could say technology. They're just extremely powerful and
it
capable.
Signals the market change in, let's call it, the industry standard Power 2 Plus of the past with the newly necessary standard of more high current outputs that the Zuma represents.
Oh yeah, and you can also see rather like you're getting more powerful technology with a smaller footprint.
Sure. I mean, I guess you also just have to think that the Power 2 Plus design is
outdated.
Pretty old.
It really is.
Well, let's not call it outdated. Let's just call it old because it doesn't not work anymore.
Oh yeah,
it's just old.
It's just really big and not quite as powerful as we need anymore for a vast section of the pedals out there.
All right, so you ready for my picks?
Yes.
You should be more ready than that, damn it. My favorite one here, and it's not even out yet, and with a significant defect of those freaking RCA plugs, is the Chalks Eventide Power Max. This is the revision of the power supply that Chalks previously did for Eventide, the Power Factor 2.
It's much bigger.
So this one is nice and low profile, 1 inch tall. 7 outputs isn't a lot, but it's plenty for most boards that for up to the larger boards and perfect for smaller ones that have lots of pedals.
Yeah, and each one's 650 milliamps.
Ridiculous amount of current on 7 outputs that are switchable between 9, 12, 15, and 18. You wanted configurable options, but always 9 volt? You got it, brother.
I'm not going to. I actually, it's probably third place for me, just because nothing else beats it as far as milliamps, features, and its value is exceptional. But the RCA plug thing is just kind of it just loses me.
I'm going to say if it's your only power supply, you're probably okay. It's not a big deal. Have some spare cables. The availability of the cables for US people might, be a thing. Look, it's not impossible to make, to cut up an RCA cable and a regular kind of Voodoo power cable and make yourself 2 of them. It's not impossible. It's not like some proprietary plug that's inaccessible.
No.
It's just less available. So you got to keep that in mind.
We never looked into why they do it, but it just lends the question is like, why are you making
it's
it
the
so
only
hard?
the only brand out of everything on here that uses a different connection. Everyone else uses the same. They've used something different.
Yeah, and it's not, it's nowhere on their website. I spent hours on their website. Does it clearly state or we use RCA plugs because of this? It's not like a selling point.
Oh, well, all right. Well, let's sometimes, we kind of assume that you should know why we prefer this. Ha ha ha! Our opinion is important. The difference with having an RCA plug on one side and the 2.1 millimeter barrel plug on the other side as the CHOX cables versus every other power supply cable which has 2.1 millimeter barrel connections on both sides is that it makes your cables that convenient, and you have a variety of straight and right angles that you can simply swap the ends when you need one for the other.
Yeah, it's the universal power supply input/output. It's it's the USB almost kind of deal of power supplies.
The USB of pedal power connectors. Yeah, why you got to go and give me, lightning connector? Why?
It's true.
Everybody was great with USB.
I like Apple products, but yeah, I agree with you.
So the Eventide Power Max is awesome. In my opinion, this is just on paper. I've seen it in real life, but they're not released yet. But on paper, it's sliced bread. So, my other pick is the low profile one spot, the CS6. For the price at $130, you've got a really, really solid option. Two 500 milliamp outputs. Is that two? Sorry. Two 500 milliamp outputs, which is like we've kind of talked about.
Yeah.
The point at which most people get to with a small board, where you got two power hungry pedals, and it gives you everything you need in a nice little package. Price to spec is great.
It's a great option.
Yeah, I would give mention to the Zuma and Ojai that you've already done, and be happy there.
But what do you use, Tony?
I do kind of like the Friedman giving you a nice number of outputs, 10 of them, and they're all at 350. It's priced a little high. It didn't make our picks because the value might not be there.
Yeah, and it's kind of also designed for their pedal board, so in a sense it's proprietary, but it can easily be mounted to anything.
Yeah, I just kind of put my foot in my mouth because I said it's not valued enough, but it really is it's our sixth scoring pedal. So why are we giving it such a bad rap?
I don't know.
Yeah, in all logical pedal sniffers fashion, we should be raving about this number 6 ranked pedal power supply. I don't know. It's got some. We've got bias, but I don't know what it is.
We are biased. I think it's just a little bit overlooked because
it's a solid choice.
Yeah, but Friedman really isn't known for power supplies, even though they do great ones.
Yeah. They in fact talk about the noiselessness of the power supply itself, because they say we built it so it can function as a riser, which means you could put your noisiest sensitive fuzz pedal on it and it won't impact it. That being a factor, I don't know why we didn't rave about it earlier.
I think it's a really good option, actually. I like it a lot. I just wish it was a little bit more deform to the others as far as the footprint and the size of it, the way it's shaped. It would just make it easier to put on.
You're right. If you don't have a Friedman board, it might be an issue, but you really shouldn't have a problem dealing with it. And it's got the most outputs of our top 10 pedals. So come on. Our top pedals. Everything's not pedals, power supply.
Are you sure?
The most outputs of our top 10. Yeah.
You resorted them, right?
I certainly did. I would not speak falsehoods of my own making.
Oh, wait, give me a second.
Yeah, solid choice.
Oh, dang, you're right. The Mondo is a lot lower than I thought. That makes me sad.
Oh, you were asking me. Yeah, your Mondo, that you raved about, is the bottom of our first tier choices. I personally have a 4x4.
But it does have the most outputs.
The Mondo has the most outputs, save the Phoenix. And perhaps the Chocolat.
I'm talking about the top tier, though.
Chocolat's 10. Yeah, gotcha. I've got a Voodoo Labs 4x4, and I have a Voodoo Labs Power 2 Plus.
So you like Voodoo Labs?
Well, that's less about market pressures and more about what's available to me at
the store.
Less than retail prices.
Agreed on that.
If I was spending my own money at regular person levels, all the same
regular
decisions
person
apply.
levels. I love that. Next time I buy a piece of gear,
Unprivileged peeps.
check your privilege, Tony.
No, I'm going to use it as much as I can while I can.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. So good.
It can't be understated how much the access to products that I have, or that we have as retail employees, how much that impacts some of my purchase decisions.
Oh yeah, it's a significant factor. I don't own neither of my power supplies are something I couldn't get at work.
Now, that's not going to keep me from recommending to you what I think is the best option here. It's just I happen to choose differently because, hey, I got it cheaper than you would have.
And that being said, if you find something for a better deal, you probably should go with that in accordance to the list we have given you.
Yeah. The more I look over these rankings, the more confident I am in kind of how they place the power supplies we surveyed.
I'm not sure about the BBE, though. The BBE seems a little bit high.
Well, because the price is an important factor.
It is.
It's the only thing under $100 besides the one spot.
It just doesn't have the high milliamp things or outputs. So that's the one limiting factor.
Yeah, but solid choice for value. So I trust the rankings, and I'm proud of my picks.
I agree. But I like all of our picks, to be honest with you.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Before we close, there is a troubleshooting episode that we missed in our troubleshooting episode simply because I forgot about it, but is also super relevant to power supplies. That is a weird power supply issue that I had with a pedal board that I built for my band's lead guitarist. We were using an EHX.
What a noob! He can't even build his own power or pedal board.
Hey, if one of your band members need to build a pedal board, who would they go to?
Me, but I would also
have them.
I would show them so they could do it themselves.
Nah, look, I did it for him as a favor, right?
I know, I like doing it too. I probably do the same thing. I still like making fun of people who can't do it though.
See, you are a pedal sniffer.
Oh yeah, I am absolutely.
All right, so on this pedal board we had a EHX B9. Electro Harmonix' organ pedal. This is in a series of pedal: the B9, the C9, the Key 9, the Synth 9, and the Mellow 9. Oh, that's whatever the Mellotron one is. All of those pedals use the same engine effectively inside, so that's important to the story. We had a Voodoo Labs Power 2 Plus, I think, on his board. And while it effectively powered everything he had, it had one single problem. When you plugged in the pedal board, everything booted up perfectly except the B9. It wouldn't come on. Why wouldn't it come on? Why doesn't it come on? Now, if you unplug the power plug from the back of the pedal, not from the power supply, but from the back of the pedal, and you plugged it back in, it would work. It would boot up. Everything would be great. If you powered it with a wall wart power supply, it was also fine. But when I used the same method to power it with a Walrus Phoenix and a Pedal Train 1250, the same thing happened. When you power up the power supply, the B9 would not power on.
What a piece of garbage, Tony. What happened?
I don't know that you can entirely blame Electro Harmonix.
Well...
Not entirely, it seems to be the only pedal susceptible to this problem. So yeah, maybe.
Well, it seems like an engineering failure.
Yeah, they didn't account for the following, which is on those power supplies I mentioned, like the Voodoo Labs, the Walrus, and the Pedal Train. They all have some kind of, let's call it, startup lag voltage climb. so that when you plug in the power supply, it doesn't immediately provide 9 volts. It provides 3, then 5, then 7, then 9, say, in over the course of a few milliseconds. Something slow enough that the electroharmonics pedal didn't get enough power when it wanted it to, so it couldn't boot up. But once you unplugged the power from the B9 after the power supply itself had booted, and this is milliseconds we're talking about. Once you unplugged it and plugged it back in again, and the power supply was at full power, the pedal comes straight up. So I could go into excruciating detail on how that difficult it was to figure that out. But let's just let it be said that even great power supplies can have incompatibilities with some kind of something.
I don't even want to call that incompatibility. I want to call that pedal failure.
I don't entirely disagree.
Because that's just... No, what other pedal does that, Tony? Name me one.
Well, I can't prove the negative, but I can't think of another one. So... I'm sorry, Electroharmonics, but that's just a fail. So we bitched and moaned, and we didn't want to record this power supply episode because it was going to be awful. But I hope you got some value out of it. We certainly did. I think, learned a lot in the process of what we already thought we knew.
I feel like we know everything about power supplies now, Tony.
I'm feeling pretty confident right now. You can never know everything, but I think we know significantly more than we did before.
Yes.
So with that, then, hey, I'm Tony.
I am David.
And we are the Pedal Sniffers.